In the cave, Rushmore cave.
I've done a lot of tours, and we've only had like 1 or 2 people visit here, so it seems like we'd have more if there was a mountain list. You guys could fill in a little bit more. Is that everyone?
Yep.
Okay.
Sweet.
Oh, me.
So yeah, I'm Matt. There's as many flash pictures as you want, as long as not too many of them are of me. But other than that, as you guys are coming out, we'll go ahead and jump right in if you guys are up for that. This is the room where we kind of take a quick stop and I do the history dump on you. So you're going to have to bear with me for that, and we'll get to the cool stuff in a little while. That being said, if you look up around you, all these rocks around us, there's a rock called solutional limestone. It's what makes up most of the caves in this area. And it's formed between 320 and 360 million years ago. And back then, where we're standing right now, was actually the bottom of a large inland sea. And the creatures in that sea died, their bones and shell would sink to the bottom. And it started to create a very heavy, very dense layer. Eventually it became so heavy and so dense that it compressed the bottom and collapsed on itself, a lot of heat and pressure, and it created a really big slab of limestone, and that covers most of the Black Hills. And before that actually started having caves in it, you have to fast forward quite a bit to 60 million years ago, when we experienced a big geological event called uplift. And all that is, it's a fancy way of describing big pieces of granite coming up through the crust of the earth. So if you guys have seen or planning on seeing Mount Rushmore, or Crazy Horse, or Harney Peak, those are just a couple examples of the pieces of granite that came up through. So really big pieces. Granite's a lot harder than limestone. So when it came up, the limestone had to move out of the way to accommodate it, caused it to buckle and crack in a lot of places. Some very long, winding cracks, and those are the basis for the cave we're about to walk through. By this point, the sea had evaporated off, so the next step of cave formation, when it would rain, the water would seep down towards the cracks that had been created. They pick up something called carbonic acid from the vegetation it passed through, and that's very good at eroding limestone. So it expanded all the tunnels. It also smoothed out all the edges. So if you guys look around you, you won't really see any jagged or rough edges in here today because of that erosion. So that gave these tunnels roughly the size and shape that they are. The last thing that had to happen, the creek you might cross on the way here, it's called Battle Creek. It carved out the valley in front of the gift shop, and the level dropped enough that gravity simply pulled all the water out of the cave, and that gave us these nice empty tunnels. So that's how it was formed. Some of the local history, though, how it was discovered, and all that stuff, you have to fast forward again to 1876, when the Black Hills was in the middle of another big event. It was in the middle of its gold rush. So people came from all over the world looking for fame and fortune. One of the places they stopped was the town called Hayward in the valley in front of the hill that we're in right now. It used to be a pretty busy town. Now it's only like 3 people, but at the time they had a lot of miners there. And one of the things that they needed to mine with was water, and the way they got that was in a wooden chute called a flume that used to run right above our heads on the surface. So one day that broke. They wanted to know where all their water was disappearing to. So they hiked up the hill. What they found was, instead of flowing down the side of the hill like they'd originally thought, it was actually flowing into a cluster of large rocks. So they brought up their equipment and pulled those rocks out. And what they found was this hole right here. So you guys can move in, get a little bit of a better look. Let everyone get a chance to see it. So that's the original entrance to the cave. So they found that, they climbed down in here. But when they got into the cave, they were a little bit disappointed, because the thing about limestone caves is that they don't have any gold in them. It's mutually exclusive, forms in a different process. All the gold in the Black Hills was brought up with the granite during the uplift. And the miners knew that, so they didn't want anything to do with the cave, abandoned it. From there, it kind of became a local curiosity. People started coming from the towns and villages. They'd heard about formations, they were just bored or kids, and they'd start crawling around in these tunnels. And they started doing that so often that eventually the family that owned this property, they figured they could make a little bit of easy money from it. And they started charging people for self-guided tours. That was pretty simple. You'd give them a little bit of money and they'd hand you a candle and say, "Don't get lost." And that's how they ran the tours until World War II. They had to shut it down because of gas and tire rationing. People couldn't make it out here anymore. So they shut it down. When they had the option to open it again afterwards, they didn't want to deal with it. So they sold it to a man from Iowa named Cy Pullen. He came with his family, and they did most of the big renovations. So they built the gift shop, the new entrance tunnel, all the stairs and handrails and lights. Those were all put in by him and his family. So they owned and operated and renovated it until about 2007. Cy died, and his daughters took over it. They didn't really want to own a cave, so they sold it to a group of 4 local guys. They still own and operate it to this day. That's how we get here. Everyone's still with me? No eyes glazed over. Perfect. Any questions then about this though before we move on to some other fun stuff? Okay, if not, just a couple quick things then before we go down the stairs. First one, it's pretty rare, but we have had a couple thunderstorms in here in the past couple of weeks. So I do warn people if the power goes out and the lights go off in the cave, just know I have a flashlight. If you guys have any phones, those provide a lot of light too. Just don't panic and run around and knock yourself out on any rocks. That makes our job a lot harder. And this first section is the most confined, so if anyone's claustrophobic, that's the tough part. Any concerns about that? Okay, if not, you guys can follow me. Just why? You guys ever seen the cave before?
Yeah, stay in the back if you're going to be wandering around. Use the handrails. Okay. Stay there.
Your hands in there.
Here, you go. Take my backpack. I'm not gonna fit through there with that. Get both sides. Pull it up. Come on, Levi.
He's dead. You come here, Dad. She's waiting. Oh, shoot. We're gonna look out the eyes. That's everything.
That's the only one that's just too
I was gonna say, if you're getting service down here, you really need to know That's right.
Yes, service and impressive. Do you have service?
No,
No.
but
Why can't
So everyone's making it up. Really quick before we keep going with anything else, is that everybody?
Yeah, we're good.
Just making sure. Not forgetting about anyone. So as everyone's making their way up, you can have a seat if you'd like. But really quick, anybody not like having a panic attack because of the checkpoints, or like having a panic attack and hiding?
Talk about an
right now?
adventure.
Group coming down. That's the exit if anyone's wondering. But otherwise, so everyone's doing okay then. No one's needs claustrophobic or anything like that. Okay, I'll let the gift shop know we made it, and then we'll keep going with the tour.
Joe, apparently.
I think they're gone. We're on our own. Thank you. You probably saw back here, sign that says the post office. So that's the name of the room we're in right now. The way it got that name, it's a little bit of a story. It goes back to the journey we just took. So we just walked, it took maybe 5 to 10 minutes to get from the entrance back here. When they first discovered the cave, it took a little bit closer to 2 or 3 hours. It was a much longer journey. A couple reasons for that. First of all, the cave used to be filled up with the clay we've been walking on. So all those passageways used to be much more shallow. Some of them were only 10 inches high. And a lot of it was crawling. We also didn't have any lights, only oil lanterns and candles. So very difficult journey to get back here. It required a lot of physical stamina. It required a lot of guts. When people got to this peak, they wanted to prove to all their family and friends that they'd achieved something that big. So what they would do to prove that is sign their initials into the rocks. So I'll show you guys a couple of those. I'm over here, some on the back wall. But if you look around your head, you're going to see a lot more. There's some initials in here. You okay?
Yeah.
Not choking on a rock or anything?
Maybe.
But yeah, so lots of
I've rock for
initials.
breakfast.
Legend says that at one point the entire town of Hayward from earlier had actually crawled back here and carved their initials into the rock. And at the time, a list of all the people in the town was kept on a sheet of paper called the town roll, and that was stored at the post office. Hayward was too small for a real post office of their own, so since this room had the town roll carved into the rocks, started calling it the post office. That's how it got its name. A couple other things while we're here. I like pointing out the natural colors we get. This dark red orange streak on the back wall over here is iron oxide, or more commonly known as rust. All along the ceiling over here, this dark purple, sometimes very deep blue, is called manganese. And then running right above your head, this lighter orange color is called Mississippian paleokarst, which is just a fancy name for petrified dirt. Those are the colors we get in the cave. Those got here naturally when it was forming. Things like hurricanes or earthquakes would deposit minerals into the shells, and then they'd be trapped until the uplift and water erosion revealed them. The other colors I like to point out, back here on this wall over here, this block spot is where people used to grab the rocks before we put the handrails in. That's why we asked you not to touch any of the rocks. And then the green right next to it is algae. Normally our cave's too cold to support algae growth, but it is very humid, a lot of moisture in the air. So when we put in the electric lights, those generate a little bit of heat. And in some areas it's just enough, heat of the rock just enough for algae to start to form. So seeing in green, that's what it is, how it got there. On that note, if you guys look over here, the thermometer on my left, the cave hovers right around 58 degrees all year round. So it doesn't matter what it is outside, if it's 110 and everyone carrying things in the sun is kind of jealous of my job, or if it's negative 10, it doesn't matter, it's going to stay 58 in the cave. But that answers probably one of the biggest questions. I've already heard it on this tour once, and that's, do you guys have any bats in here? And the answer is very, very rare. Very, very rare to see a bat because it's too warm for them. When they fly down here and try to hibernate, they can't slow their metabolism down enough, and they wind up waking up early. And when they go out to look for food, too early, no food's there, and they starve to death. It's a pretty big deterrent for them. The other thing we really don't have in the cave is a lot of standing water. We have like one small pool, point that out later on. Without standing water, insects don't have a place to lay eggs, and rodents don't have anything to drink. So they stay away from here too. So it's pretty rare to see anything living in here. We do roughly 2,500 tours a year, and we'll only see on average 2 animals. So if you guys see anything, you're either really lucky or really unlucky. It kind of depends on who you ask. That's the animals. The one other thing, bottom of these stairs, I'll point out whoever's behind me and just keep passing it on. There's a big looking hole in the ceiling, a really big canal. That's a chimney, and that's just a hole that connects the surface down to the cave. They're actually pretty small. The biggest chimney we have is about the size of a tennis ball, but they create the really big passageways down here, just a side effect of how they form. What happens is they began at the surface and eat their way down, and when they got to the cave, it was already filled with water. So the water coming down the chimney backed up and eroded outwards, giving a really large passage that pinches off. Now, those are important. It's how we get fresh air in here. It does it through a system called barometric breathing. Very simply, all that means is the pressure outside is higher than what's in here. It forces air in, and if it's lower, it sucks air out. It gets us fresh air, which is a tour guide I'm really grateful for. But otherwise, any questions before I move on then? You have one?
Fossils,
Fossils?
yes.
We do have a couple fossils, but they're very small and we can't see them from the tour path. They're a little bit off of it. So if you went crawling around a little bit, you could probably see some, but
What's the
Yeah.
depth?
what's the depth?
Yeah, how
Right
deep
here?
are we, like, how much is above us more importantly?
I don't know, yeah. I don't know exactly here, we've only measured a couple spots, but my guess would be somewhere around 60 to 80 feet. And honestly, I'll point out the deepest spot, we've measured that, but honestly, the big reason we haven't actually gone deeper, what really happens is we stay pretty level throughout the cave, but there's a hill on top of us, so the hill goes up as we go in, so it's kind of hard to get an accurate reading for most places. Very deep is a good guess, though. Any other questions? Otherwise, you guys can follow me then. Check that out.
Buckle it, it's easier.
It's really good.
Buckle it up front. Wait for me. Jimmy. Jimmy. Hose.
Natural hose formation.
Where do you think that hole goes? Any guesses?
Hey, there's a car
It's actually a trick question, the hole doesn't go anywhere.
Just stop.
It is right there, yeah.
There's a
Just
name.
get up to your waist and then we have to pull you out by the ankle.
Elvis. It says something up there.
Come on, guys.
Elvica or something. Maybe it says it goes to Narnia.
We do go that way. We'll see, my promise is we see everything interesting. We just can't see it all at once, unfortunately. But the room we're in right now, this room's significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, this was the end of the cave until about 1920, so it's as far back as you could go. And it took about 3.5 hours to get here. And as a result, people used it kind of as a break room. So sit down here, eat lunch, have a breather, whatever they had to do to get ready for another 3.5 hour crawl back out the way they'd come in. They started doing, maybe they sat down here too long, I don't know. They started looking at the rocks kind of in the same way most people look at clouds. So we call this the image room. Found quite a few. Don't run off crazy quite yet. You guys move out of the way right in the back there. See this? The snout and nostrils of our cave pigs sticking out of the rock, poking out. You guys move over to this side of the room, over here.
Alligator.
Up on the ceiling we have an elephant.
What?
With its eye, the dirt in its eye, its trunk comes around, and its ear, and its mouth down here.
I see a bird.
Bunny right below that with its ear and its head. and then it's back right there. But like it's about to hop away. My favorite's right under that is the squirrel. With its head and it's holding a nut.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then its tail curls around and around like that. I
That's
think the
cool.
crowd favorite though, over here, everyone can see this one. That's the duck foot. Coming down through the rock. The really corny joke that goes with the duck foot is a duck was waddling along one day and it stepped in a quack, got its foot stuck. But no, the dads are groaning, it's bad. And then the last one I point out, this hand right here, the finger points back towards the gift shop. So if you guys lose me, now you have an escape route. But those are just a couple. The legend says there's 22 images down here. I haven't done it yet, and I don't really intend to sit down here long enough looking at rock to find them all. That's the other reason this room is important. That time it was shared by another man named Virgil Williams, and in 1920 he came back here not looking for images, he was looking for more caves. And what he noticed were these water lines along the back wall going all the way. He figured if water was flowing, it had to have a destination. So we brought down a bucket and a shovel, dug about 2.5 days, 50 feet, came out into the biggest room in our cave with most of the cool formations. We're pretty big fans of him here. Before we check that out, a couple things. The deepest point of the cave is actually right at the bottom of these stairs, and that's about 150 feet down. And then this next set of stairs also is a warning, it's the longest flight. So, just so you know, it's not as bad as the ones up to the gift shop though, so if you made those, that's the test. And then the one other thing, the tradition is if you discover a room, you get to name it. So people stretch their creativity a little bit and come up with what you might have named the room if you'd found it in 1920. But otherwise, any questions before we check that out? I'm actually going to have you guys, oh, you have one?
What if you find a room today?
What if you found it? I don't know what I would name it, it kind of depends. But you could name it still.
Yes.
Do you have an idea for a name for a room?
No.
Name it after yourself?
Billy.
Billy. I had a kid named Jake, and he wanted to name every room Jake's room. But it would have been an interesting. We're in Jake's room again. But I'm actually gonna have you guys hang tight for just 30 seconds. We're not coming down.
He discovered a room.
He just doubled his. And then they're just gonna pass by us.
What?
Speaking of the name. I don't know how well that works.
Oh, hey, I got that same.
All I know is it says buns. Oh, it's buns in different languages. One is green, so in others.
I don't read that
Dad, I think I might have discovered a room.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Just discover that room in there,
I'm sure there's room.
and then one in there. Actually,
Speaker? You don't think I've seen that?
yeah, but it goes out into there.
Thank you guys for being.
It goes like 10 feet. What?
One more. For this one? There is a tour, it's just that this isn't.
I already found that one.
You have to call now. I'll show you that for you. I need to head through this little crack off on the side over here.
No, that's it. Let's go this way.
That way.
Oh, thank you. We found some animals.
Actually, humans are type of animals.
That's okay, the nice thing is you get one relation.
Hey, is it okay if I just stay here?
What?
Is it okay if I stay here till you get back?
If you really need to?
Yeah.
Okay,
Why?
actually, you could also wait in the post office too,
You want me to go back?
but, That's where we also come back around.
Okay.
We're gonna go through that crack.
I can just wait here then.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. You guys go ahead. Yes. Yes, fine. I don't bother myself. My nails start bothering me. Just be good.
What's this?
Take pictures for me. No, go ahead. You guys.
Dad, if you want to see, Dad, I'm only taking videos. If you want to see the videos, you have to go to YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, Dad? But we're gonna have to put some on. Head.
Quiet.
Whoa. Whoa. That's it.
Okay. Really quick before we start, anyone come up with a really good name for this room? So we can scratch it. No? Ice skating room. Unfortunately, Virgil Williams and Nathan, who's about as creative as the rest of you guys, came in and took a look around and named this the big room. So it's pretty accurate. It's about 2.5 acres if you can see all the way around. What this room has that you probably noticed a lot of when you first walked in was a lot of formations on the ceiling, the floor, all over the walls and every place. The reason that this room has formations and the rest of the cave doesn't, it's not so much the cave, it's more about what's above it. I mentioned a little bit earlier how most of the cave we've been walking through is under a hill. When it rains on that hill, the water hits it and runs down into the valley. Right now we're actually under a meadow in this part of the cave. It is dripping. If you get dripped on, it's called a cave kiss. It's supposed to be good luck. But we're under a meadow, so when it rains on a meadow, the water has a chance to kind of seep in, and it makes its way through the limestone, and on its way through, it picks up a mineral called calcite. That's what all these formations are made out of, the calcite formations. So we'll go ahead and name those for you guys, so you know. The ones on the ceiling, those are called stalactites. Actually, there's some long thin ones in a couple areas. You can see those long thin ones are called soda straw formations, both because of their shape, also because they're hollow on the inside. So the water drips down through the center, and they go down until a piece of dirt or limestone clogs them up. And they form off and create what looks a little bit more like an arrowhead. Call those arrowhead formations. A couple there. Yep. We have very creative naming people in the cave department. But the water drips down the outside, pools on top, and they grow upwards until they rejoin the ceiling, and then become a mature stalactite and grow down again. Their counterparts on the ground over here, the stalagmites, the water drips down to the ground and cools and evaporates. And it just does that over and over again until it creates a mound and there's flows over that. So there's some here, all over this back wall as well, some over here. And on that note over here, the cousin is called flowstone. And that's more drips in the ceiling and flows over a rock, depositing calcite as it goes. Up here, and the other two, it's a column, and the stalactite and stalagmite go together for a long period of time. And then the last one, this long, thin white strip, it's called cave ribbon. They're also affectionate to cave bacon. It looks kind of like a fat line to a strip of bacon. So this one is a crack in the limestone and the water column, and you pass it over and over again in thousands of years. A little bit of formation you get. You guys look around a little bit more, you'll also start to different color.